how to stop blaming your wife. Now, let me kind of set the context for this a little bit, right? Like, blaming your wife in marriage is what happens is it gives you, what's the best way to say this? It gives you an immediate relief of responsibility, ownership, commitment, right? And really looking at yourself from those perspectives of responsibility, ownership, and commitment. It is very addictive, in fact, to the point where you pointing the finger becomes a norm. And I can also guarantee you that if you blame your wife for things in the marriage or for any reason, then you are most likely doing a lot of this blaming in other areas of your life, where you are, not demonstrating responsibility from a place of ownership and commitment. Now, there are three ways men can blame. Well, women as well. In general, a human being can blame three ways in his life. So what we're going to do is we're going to dive into those and kind of take a step back from just purely talking about blaming your wife, okay? And the reason why I want to do this is because if you understand why blame happens and how it shows up in your life, right, then it's not only that you can stop it with your wife, but then you can start recognizing how it shows up in other areas of your life and stop it there as well, okay? And, as we said this many times before, the way you do one thing is the way you do everything, okay? So let's look at these three ways a man can blame. And then we're going to also go into, at the end, what is the underlying reason why any one of these blames happen, okay? So the first one is blaming yourself, okay? Blaming yourself is when you have taken certain actions, they didn't pan out the way you wanted it to, and you look at yourself and you blame yourself that you are the reason why XYZ failed. You are the reason why she's hurting. You are the reason why the project wasn't completed. You are the reason, and your abilities or lack thereof, that so-and-so is no longer talking to you, right? So blaming internally towards yourself. Now, the second type of blaming is when you're blaming others, okay? And you've probably done this before. I know I have in my life. John's perfect. He's never blamed others other than me. So blaming others is when... Exactly. Blaming others is when you look outside from yourself. So you're not blaming yourself, but now you're looking at other people, that they are the cause of the potential negative outcome or the circumstance that you're in, right? And we can start doing examples. Like all the other examples that we've talked about before, you didn't get the project done, the project wasn't finished on time, so-and-so is not talking to you, so-and-so is hurting. And then you look at others, blaming them for the situation happening. So these two, you're probably familiar with, but I want to put it out there. Now the third one is a little bit different in the sense that it's about blaming the system. Okay, so blaming the system, and I'll put it in quotation marks. The system is basically, when you look at the government, for example, blaming the government is an example of blaming the system. You work at a company, at a corporation, and they're not doing some of the processes are not the way that they should be. So you're blaming the system. Okay. The rich versus the poor, you're blaming the system. Okay. So these are the three examples of how we blame. We blame ourselves, we blame others, or we blame the system. Okay. There's no really other way to blame. Those are the three targets, if you will, for blaming. Now, what you need to understand is that blame is emotionally driven, okay? The only reason somebody would blame is because they have bullets in place that don't allow them to take responsibility, ownership over what's happening in their life. In other words, they are out of control. Because when a man is in control and um, he can actually surrender to the commitment of responsibility and ownership in a way where nothing is happening to him, but he is the one that's making things happen. When you're coming from that context, you're not blaming. There's no way you can blame, because you're constantly looking at yourself and asking, where am I responsible or in all of this? What is the lesson to learn? And what is the lesson that I can learn to then improve from here on? And when you come from that place, blame goes right out the window. Now, you can't really come from that place unless you're looking for a scapegoat. The only reason you would be looking for a scapegoat is because you're not emotionally self-sufficient. So when you get rid of your bullets and you become emotionally self-sufficient, okay, then blame starts to disappear from your life, because you're able to now choose to step into responsibility and ownership. And you become in control of your circumstances versus your circumstances controlling you.
Yeah, and just to hammer that point home, right, with respect to responsibility. And the big difference between being 100% responsible versus even 99% responsible. Like, the man will say, wow, I'm being 99% responsible. Like, I'm pretty close. I'm pretty close to being there. I'm pretty close to actually owning my life. But if you look at, the tire on your car, or the wheel on your bike, and it's inflated to the perfect PSI, exactly as it should be. That for me is 100% represent, and that can represent 100% responsibility, right? Now you put a nail in that tire. Suddenly, it's not as sound as it once was. And if that nail represents you being 1% irresponsible, what's the impact of that? Over time, it's going to seep away all the 99% of being responsible. That 1% of being irresponsible actually has a huge impact on the entirety of 100% being responsible, or the 99% remaining. So that 1% is actually doing the damage. So yes, as awesome as it is that you're being 99% responsible, pay attention to why you're not being 100% responsible. Because 100% responsible represents that fully inflated tire, that perfect wheel that's ready to get you from A to B. But if you mess with the integrity of that by taking out the responsibility, you're actually really impacting your ability to go from A to B without, breaking down, without stopping at every gas station to reinflate, without making all these pit stops along the way, because you're not stepping into being 100% responsible.
It's kind of like a backdoor too, right?
Mm-hmm.
In some way, shape, or form. You're leaving. It doesn't matter if it's 1% or doesn't matter if it's 1% not responsible or 99% not responsible. You're leaving that back door open from fully committing to it. Yeah. Okay. So, while these may seem very obvious, the emotionally driven side is the critical part to take away here. Now that you understand the three different targets for blaming, and you get it that it's driven by emotions and undealt, bullets. Translate this into your marriage, right? You're blaming your wife, and by the way, it goes the other way too. Okay, when your wife is blaming you, I'm not saying that's okay or not okay. What I'm saying is now you start to understand that when your wife is blaming, where it's coming from. When you are blaming your wife, where it's coming from.